Well, we are in Valsaisera. That is one of the, I think, prettiest area in the mountain of Treviso, of Friuli. And looking in front of us, we can see Pigna, a project we worked on, we designed together with my father. A project we are quite proud of. Are two tree houses in the nature connected to an existing agriturismo. They're quite special. First of all, there are tree houses. So for an architect to design a tree house is like to accomplish a dream, a childhood dream. Because everybody, at least when I was a kid, I was loving to build tiny houses on the trees, to climb the trees and to feel connected to them. And so to build it, to actually build it and see it and design it once you are an adult, it's quite unique as an experience. And they're also quite unique because of their shape. So they remind of pine cone. So ideally they come from the trees, they stay attached to the tree, and then they belong to the tree itself. So it's a kind of metaphorical way to be connected even more to the forest. Some years ago they wouldn't have been possible because technology of wood construction wouldn't have allowed to build such a structure, because there are bent ribs that go along the structure, and like a cage they keep the pine cone fixed and stable. So indeed there is something futuristic, or at least something contemporary about them. And yes, when you approach them, the tree house, the pine cone shape is quite scaled up. So yeah, there is a kind of a feeling of strength, or of something that is very well, it's imposing on the nature. So yeah, they are integrated in a way that the materials are local. They are made from the same material from which the wood are made. The shingles that cover them as well are locally taken. All the people that build them were coming from the area, from the valley as well. But yes, they have something that makes them, they set them apart from regular construction, definitely. I managed to finally sleep in them for a few nights very recently, because I'm happy to say that I always overbooked. But to be there, it's unique. There is nothing around you, there are no noises, pure silence, just some deers making their voice if you go there in autumn. But otherwise it's just pure nature, just like sky, blue, perfect sky with no light pollution, stars, forest, trees, you and your girlfriend or whoever is with you. It's a great experience. Well, sustainability is one of the most overused words in architecture, in all the fields, I guess, in the recent years. So it's very vague sometimes and very wide, the meaning of the word. But architecture and the construction field accounts for almost 40% of the global CO2 emissions. So to be sustainable in architecture is something that really matters, because it's a giant producer of CO2 and pollution. In this case, sustainability matters in a way that the construction is local, so there is the minimum amount of transportation required. The construction, being a tree house, is suspended from the ground, so there is no ground consumption, and it's also, of course, a good point. The materials, wood, timber construction, CLT in that case, it is sustainable compared to concrete or compared to other construction technique. So definitely there is a step in the right direction, I would say. To build more sustainable material, for sure, a great part of the equation, but also the way itself we live, it's important, because living in wide, very comfortable and beautiful spaces sometimes is not exactly sustainable, because you need a lot of energy to warm them up, you need a lot of land to build them, so they go against a principle of sustainability. So ideally you should build on a smaller footprint, you should build possibly taller if you need. You should build with timber. It's not perfect, but it's better than other materials. So you should consume less resources, you should use solar panels. So there are, I think, a lot of tiny elements that would make a more sustainable approach to architecture, but as a lifestyle. So they go along. Having green roofs is definitely positive. Having vegetation in your building, it is. Trees itself, simply having a tree would cool down your building, your facade in summer. So very simple. Then overselling green architecture in renderings, pretending that that will save the planet, it's a bit optimistic, I guess. But it is a direction. So if you combine also the way you build, so building with again with CLT, building in a sustainable way with a lot of green in it, this is probably the way. In Italy there is another positive example of architecture. It's called a practice. He's called Stefano Boeri, and he did Bosco Verticale in Milan. So it's basically a tower filled with trees and plants on its balconies. That has been very successful, and it's very similar to the approach that other offices like MVDV have. So yeah, I would say it depends if you do it with honesty or with just a wish of greenwashing your project. Well, what I hope that I have picked up are some probably conceptual ideas, so like trying to be bold in your statements. So if you want to be sustainable, if you want to be green, you have to do it no matter what the regulation says, no matter what the tradition says. Because tradition is beautiful, but sometimes you have to go against it, because nothing is perfect. Actually, the office where I work now in Salzburg is a small office in the mountains, so somehow really matches my birthplace, my region. So it's very similar what we do there and what I would do on my own. And it's a very sustainable office. We also do a lot of timber construction, wood construction, very small footprints. So what I'm trying to do is try to move step by step towards this kind of architecture and this kind of future. I don't think there is one solution, like a magic recipe, but I think there are little steps. So if you can build, if you need to build, you should do it with sustainable resources. If you can reuse, you should try to reuse as much as possible. The Architecture Pritzker Prize, that is basically the Nobel of Architecture, this year was given to Lacaton and Vassal. It's a French practice, and they never build, they just reuse and transform existing building. So reuse, recycle, this is a great strategy for cities. Sometimes you need to break the rule in a good way, possibly. And how to do it in places that have a long tradition, that's not an easy question. So I guess a possible answer is to be flexible. So like city centers should be preserved and restored as much as possible, or integrated with green roofs or something subtle, because you don't want to lose the tradition and you want to lose the beauty. It is already there. But the moment that you step outside of the city center, then it's the moment to really act and try to be to go along with your century. You know, like you should follow the research, follow what material are there, ready to be placed in a better manner. Which shapes make sense nowadays. So I think the roads are different. But there are actually at the moment a lot of projects going on in this area. The one you mentioned is the most recent one. So it will be the extension and the landscape design of a beautiful hotel here in Valbruna. And also for that one, we are trying to somehow to give our statement as architects. So what we hope to do is to be very proud of what we are doing, because it's what the future of architecture as we see it should look like. So we're trying to. The hotel, as you might know, it's wonderful and has a fantastic park in front of it with existing trees, very old ones, and hills. So we're trying to integrate as much as possible our design into the landscape to create kind of a design that is part of the nature, part of the landscape itself. So very different and very recognizable in terms of contrast from the existing building. And we are aiming for a completely timber structure add-ons, for green roofs, for shapes that would somehow remind of the beautiful mountains behind us. So this is definitely one of the exciting projects we are working on. Otherwise, we have other projects in Tarvisio. They are related to ski school, and they are quite interesting as well, because they are 4 projects all connected to each other, ideally, because they create a path and a sustainable and a livable intervention integration to the nature. So we are bringing small facilities for children next to the ski slopes, and we are somehow tucking in the buildings in the existing landscape. So the building will be almost invisible from some point of views, and as sustainable as we can do. I grew up architecturally recently, of course, but in years in which shape and not sustainable material like concrete were still very strong. I studied with Zadid, which is a fantastic architect, but whose buildings are not exactly what I love at the moment. Whereas what my father always did was always working with the local materials, have local choices, have reusable source of construction. And it's something that I have to say in the beginning of my career I overlooked, but now I'm absolutely embracing and admiring, because it's the way to work.